Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I'm Jason, and this is the Sports Spectrum podcast. We're so glad that you're tuning into the show today. So excited for today's show. The interview, the conversation that we have with Sam Marsonek, a former Major League Baseball pitcher. This is exactly why Sports Spectrum exists. When you hear Sam's story of coming to faith and his miraculous turnaround from where he was to where he is now, man, it's going to make you just cheer him on. It's going to make you feel so good. It's going to make you believe that we serve a God who is bigger and better than anything that we have going on in this world. So I can't wait for you to hear that conversation with Sam. Before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about our website. First of all, sportspectrum.com. We have content all over the website that you need to go check out, including a daily devotional every single day, 6 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, right there. Great way to start your day right with the Lord. Then we have different stories, articles on the intersection of sports and faith all over the website. I mean, it goes back as far as 1985. So you really need to go just spend an hour and get lost over at sportspectrum.com. And then if you want to listen to every podcast, it's right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. It's also at our YouTube channel and everywhere podcasts are found. But sportspectrum.com, everything is sort of gift wrapped right there in one spot for you to enjoy and consume right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. And we are presented today by our friends at Compassion International. And we know this because of COVID-19. So many are really stuck in bad situations. And with Compassion Kids, we're talking about children in poverty. And the pandemic has magnified their needs. And these kids and their families are really in crisis. I mean, the issue of food has gone from being hungry to starvation. That's how bad it's getting right now. And Compassion is doing something about it. And this is what I love about Compassion, because most of the events that they normally rely on to help sponsor these children in crisis are canceled or postponed due to the pandemic, and that's left nearly 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. So we're partnering with Compassion and our friends in the sports world, our pro sports friends, to fill the stadium. 70,000 kids happens to be the same number as what the average size of many pro football stadiums are that were once filled and sat mostly empty this past year. So I'm inviting you to step up and help us fill the stadium, 70,000 empty seats representing a child in crisis who needs your help, who needs our help to step up and be a part of this great initiative. Check out the website, fillthestadium.com. Fillthestadium.com. You can donate, you can give, and you can pray, and you can help release these kids from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. We also thank our friends at Water Mission for sponsoring and partnering with us today as well, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry working to stop the global spread right now of COVID-19 by providing urgently needed safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. The water crisis steals the lives of thousands each day, more than war, terrorism, and weapons of mass destruction combined. It's a really bad, dire situation, the global water crisis for many around the world. Every dollar invested in safe water yields $4 to $34 in economic return. Think about this, 4.4 billion people lacking access to sanitation, adequate sanitation, 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water. Those numbers are staggering. In the billions. That's insane to me. 2.1 billion lacking access to safe water. And Water Mission is doing something about it. This is why we believe in them. This is why we want to encourage you to partner with them, to be a part of the great work and the great mission that Water Mission is on. Go check out their ministry right now at watermission.org, watermission.org, to learn more and to pray with them, fighting the global water crisis. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really excited about today's interview with Sam Marsonek. So Sam is a former Major League Baseball pitcher. And interestingly enough, he pitched in one game in his Major League Baseball career. That was July 11th, 2004 against the Tampa Bay Rays. Pitched 1 1/3 innings, 0 earned runs. And it's the only Major League Baseball game that he would ever pitch in. But as I tell a lot of people, if you do it once, it can go on the resume. And so Sam did it, and he did it at the highest level with the most famous team in Major League Baseball, the New York Yankees, in July of 2004. But this conversation is more than just baseball. See, I start the conversation off too, you'll hear this, when I talk about the plans of God and the plans of man. Sam's plan was to become the greatest baseball player of all time. God's plan was to use Sam's baseball journey to point people back to him. And what a story this is. I'm telling you, it's one of those miraculous conversion stories, taking a life that was full of guilt and regret and pain and turning it around for purpose. Man, you're going to love this story with Sam Marsonek. I'm going to shut up and let's get to the conversation here with Sam Marsonek on Sports Spectrum. Sam Marsonek, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
All right, Jason, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's good to hear your voice, good to talk to you, and I'm excited to hear about your story and your journey. And it's funny because the first thing I think of when I hear about your story and I read about your story is I think of the plans of God and the plans of man. And your plans, I'm guessing, let's say God had different plans for you on your journey. But what were your plans? When you think back to being a kid, I'm guessing being a big leaguer was part of the plan for you.
Yeah, I mean, my plans were not just to be a big leaguer, but I really wanted to be the best. And honestly, at a young age, I thought I was going to be the best. When I was 12, I cut out an article in the paper on Ted Williams. And there was a quote there. It said, "All I want out of life is that when I walk down the street, folks say there goes the greatest hitter who ever lived." And I scratched out hitter and put in pitcher because really, I mean, that's all I wanted. And at a young age, I pursued the game really with all my heart. So, yeah, my plans were to be the best pitcher ever. So
I know you had an encounter with the Lord in your late 20s, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. What was faith like for you growing up? Was it even a part of your life?
We grew up Catholic. I went to a Catholic high school, Tampa Jesuit. Faith wasn't a part of anything that we did. It was more a ritual. When we were younger, when I got into middle school, we kind of stopped going. So it really wasn't a part of anything. My God, and really all I worshiped was the game. I mean, it was all baseball.
What was it like for you growing up, coming into your own as a baseball player? And again, obviously you have talent. If you're selected by a team in the Major League Baseball draft, you have talent. So where are you 16, 17 years old starting to realize that you're pretty good at this thing called baseball?
Probably middle of my senior year. Scouts started to, really flock our high school. And later on, before the summer started, they had the first team All-American stuff came out. And this is back before you paid $750 to an organization to get ranked. This was 13 or 14 guys that were selected as first team All-Americans. And when I was chosen, then I kind of thought, well, maybe I do have a chance to go high in the draft. And then of course on draft day, I got a phone call by Texas, taking me 24th overall. So it really wasn't until midway through my senior year that I thought, well, shoot, this is going to happen for sure. So
take me to that day when you got drafted, when you got selected. That's got to be a pretty cool moment where even if your faith isn't there yet, and obviously you're a different person now, but that's got to be one heck of a moment when you're selected by a Major League Baseball team.
Yeah, it was special, and like I said, we didn't have access to the information that kids have now. So we didn't have a computer back then. The newspaper articles from our local newspaper was all that we really had. So I didn't know where I was going to go. We didn't really have an agent. My dad handled that. And so when the phone rang and Lenny Strelich said, they had chosen me, my parents were there, my grandmother and a few other friends. One of my best friends, Jeff Getz, who was selected the following year by the Mets, was there, and just a really, it was emotional, exciting, but, kind of fearful because you don't even know what's next. I mean, the crazy thing about that time, I really thought the minor leagues was just one team.
Right.
Like you go to AAA and then you go to the big leagues. I didn't have any idea how pro ball was even structured back then.
Yeah, and it took you, in essence, 8 years. You were drafted in 96. You make your big league debut in 04, and there's a lot that goes on just getting to the big leagues and all that took place, but that's 8 years there. And I'm curious who Sam Marsonek was during those years, because I've talked to a lot of guys, a lot of baseball players who, especially when they're in the midst of the minor leagues, but even ones that, get a cup of coffee in the majors and then appreciate, I guess, that grind that really is the minor leagues. For you, that's a long time, 8 years that you waited. What was that time like during those years, grinding in the minor leagues? And I think you mentioned, previously before we hit record that, you hadn't really known any failure up until this point, until you became a big league or a pro baseball pitcher, I should say. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it was hard. It didn't go the way that I'd planned, like you said, for sure. My first assignment was Pulaski, Virginia, Appalachian League, and I struggled and really had no idea how to deal with failure. And when the game is as important as it was to me, it was my life, and not living up to expectations that not just I had on myself, but others had on me. I didn't know how to deal with that. I had no clue, and I quickly learned one way, and that was through alcohol. And alcohol was just a way to relieve some of that pain, that feeling of being a disappointment, and really at an early age that just became who I was. And over the next 8-9 years, it not only became an escape, but now it became more of my identity. And that whole mantra of play hard, party hard, I took a hold of it, and it cost me a lot for sure. I was injured a lot of my career, probably because I didn't take care of myself the way I should have. But the game it consumed my life, and it didn't matter if I was doing well or rehabbing an injury. It's all I thought about. And, those 8-9 years were hard, because again, it was all or nothing. It was just baseball. And, when you were scuffling like I was and being labeled early on as a bust, not really that easy to deal with. And unless you walk through it, it's hard to really even explain what I felt, just failing as much as I did.
So you say you coped with alcohol. Was that something? I grew up in a family with a dad who was an alcoholic, and so I've never struggled personally with it, but I've been around it. And I'm wondering if that was something that you were able to hide for a while, or was that something that was kind of out there in the open and people were suddenly starting to be a little bit concerned with what was happening?
No, I couldn't hide that. I was not it wasn't concealed very well. I got in trouble a lot off the field. So, names in the paper, DUIs, arrests, pretty reckless. I was traded my third year after signing with Texas to the Yankees, and I think that's a large part of why the trade happened, just, of how I was off the field. So I don't think that was really a secret.
Sam Marsonek is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. You mentioned going to the Yankees. You got traded to the Yankees in '99. And before we get into, your time in making that having that chance, I guess, to play in the big leagues, you were around so many of the Hall of Famers from that team that won multiple World Series in spring training, I'm guessing. What was it like to be around those guys when you were in the midst of a team that was in the midst of a dynasty? They had World Series appearances in 96, 98, 99, 2000, 2003, and you get there in 99 or 2000 or so, and suddenly you're around these legends. What was that like just as a player? Were you able to appreciate that, given that you had, all the struggles that you were talking about as a player, kind of on the field, but also behind the scenes with the alcohol? Were you able to appreciate being around guys like that?
Honestly, no. I didn't. I didn't take advantage of what I was given. Tons of regrets. I mean, like I said, I think because of, at such a young age, I thought I was going to be the best. Being around the best wasn't maybe as inspiring or encouraging as it should have been, because I felt like that's where I was supposed to be anyway. But even looking back, I mean, the regret of not taking advantage of the opportunity that was given. I mean, I still think about that sometimes. Just soaking up those moments of having a Yogi Berra sitting next to you in spring training, or I mean, all these guys, Mariano and Jeter, and all these guys in your locker room, access to all this information and knowledge, and me just wasting the opportunity. So, yeah. But
you still got an opportunity, because in 2004, and this is really a big part of your story, I think, from a bunch of different perspectives, you make your major league debut in July of 2004. Can you take me through, because that's still got to be a pretty cool moment, even if you're not appreciating it or you're struggling. I mean, that's still the one call that every baseball player desires to have, and have that opportunity. Do you remember that day when you were told you're headed to the big leagues to be a Yankees pitcher?
Oh, yeah. We were in Scranton, Pennsylvania, playing Phillies AAA team, and it was right after BP came in, and Bucky Dent was my manager at the time. Neil Allen was my pitching coach. Billy Connors was our rover, so he was in town, along with Hop Cassidy and Frank Howard, and anyway, I remember the whole deal. Bucky called me in and right away just said, "Pack your bags. You're going to New York." And man, I started crying, and really up until that point, emotion like that had never come out of me. Maybe some anger and stuff like that, but not this emotion of finally making it. After all the stuff that I'd gone through, I'd put myself through, my family through, to finally have made it was awesome. And I remember walking out of the coach's room, and all the players had already known, and they see me crying. Some of those guys start crying, and it was just a really emotional day. And a lot of us had played together the past 5 years, and even Neil Allen was with me for 3 or 4 years up until that point. So everybody knew the history, and I went out in the stadium and I called home, and I tried to talk to my mom and tell her what had happened. Well, yeah. I said I got called up, and of course I'm crying. It sounded like I said I got cut up, and which yeah. would be par for the course. And now she's crying, and I'm like, "No, Mom, I'm going to New York." And anyway, it was a pretty special day.
So take me to let's walk through this experience here for those that are listening, including myself, who's never had an experience like that. So you get the call, you go to New York, and then you're there. And I understand you were there for a few days before you got into a game. What was that like, just being there for a few days and being around the big league club? I have to imagine there was an immediate difference going from being a minor leaguer to being a major leaguer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I flew out the next morning and was picked up and taken. I asked the driver to take me straight to the stadium. It was before lunch, maybe 11 o'clock or so. We had a night game, and I wanted to go. I didn't want them to change their mind. I didn't want something to happen. So I'm going straight to the stadium, and I think Torrey was the first person that I saw later in the morning, and walked into his office, and he basically just said, welcome to New York. If you just throw strikes, and finish these games that are not save situations, then you're going to be here for a long time. And of course, in 2004, Mariano was having to come in a lot. Situations he shouldn't have had to. And so anyway, just walking through the stadium, Monument Park, just embracing everything. That afternoon, my parents flew up. 6 of my buddies came into town. And I mean, the experience was I was enjoying on the field and trying to enjoy everything off the field as well. And just wasn't really a great mix for me to try to do both.
So I know we're going to talk about how the mix off the field kind of led to really you becoming a follower of Christ and kind of understanding who Jesus is. So we'll get to that in a second. But I do got to stay on the field for one more moment here, because it was July 11th when you made your major league debut. You get in the game against the Tampa Bay Rays. What do you remember about that day? What sticks out in your mind now that you get that one chance, that one opportunity to go pitch?
Yeah, so, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have any rest the night before, and wasn't expecting to go in the game at all. It was somewhat close going into the 7th. It was maybe 5-3, 6-3. Was not even thinking about pitching. The All-Star break was the next day, so more plans on going home and celebrating with friends and family. And anyway, Heredia had gotten into trouble, and the phone rings, and Rich Monteleone, hey, Sam, get up. You got the next hitter. I remember not really feeling a whole lot. Kind of went numb. Threw a couple pitches. He asked if I was good. I said, yeah, let's go. I'm good. And I just, when they opened the gate out of the bullpen, I mean, there was 55,000 there. It was a Sunday afternoon. Of course, family and friends, like I said, were there. And I just remember the run jog from the pen to the mound. It seemed like a mile. And I mean, so a part of me was enjoying the run. The other part was like I was dying to get there because I'm out of breath. Maybe because I didn't sleep the night before, but just standing on the mound, again, just trying to take it in. And then, I gave up some long fly balls for sure, swing and bump, Carl Crawford, and end up finishing the game through an inning and a third. So yeah, it was. I remember all of it, really.
Sports Spectrum today is presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And right now, children around the world are living in poverty and facing unimaginable circumstances as a result of COVID-19. And communities in poverty are facing shutdowns and restrictions, just like we are, but without any safety net. And as hardworking day laborers, most of the families Compassion serves work each day in order to buy food for that day and maybe the next. And where many of us have stocked up for days or weeks at a time, they have neither the income or even refrigeration to afford to stay at home. And as a result, parents are forced to make unthinkable choices between going to work and risking infection, or not going to work and facing hunger and starvation. And COVID-19 has multiplied their needs exponentially, and they need help. That's where Compassion comes in. That's where you can come in. With Fill the Stadium, a pro-athlete-led initiative raising critical resources for 70,000 children and their families impacted by COVID. Every empty seat represents one child who needs support for the critical next 12 months. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty, and we need your help. You can go to the website, fillthestadium.com. Fillthestadium.com. That's the website. Check it out. You can give, you can donate, and help release these children and their family from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by Water Mission, and they're a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry fighting the global water crisis with safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. And right now they are working to stop the global spread of COVID-19. Urgently needed safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. They're providing them, Water Mission is, to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. Listen to some of these numbers. These were statistics right before the pandemic. 4.4 billion people lacking access to adequate sanitation. 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water around the world. These are billion with a B people that don't have adequate sanitation and safe water. Water Mission is stepping in to fill that gap, and you can join them. You can pray with them, and you can donate right now with Water Mission by going to the website watermission.org. Watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis. Watermission.org. Take us through what happened immediately after the game and in the aftermath, which unfortunately leads to you only pitching that one game in the majors. But really, like I said, it goes from Sam's story to God's story. So take us through what happened.
Yeah, so went home the next day for the break and just was out fishing and drinking, and I ended up getting on a wakeboard and just made a really bad decision. I ended up blowing out my knee, and it wasn't good. I had called Cashman the next day, and we were supposed to meet the team in Detroit, and I just let them know what happened. And anyway, it was hard for a lot of reasons, but I think when I was laying there in the water, I knew that my career was probably over. And I mean, at that point, just got deeper into alcohol and drugs, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Ended up going to spring training the next year with the Yankees. I didn't throw at all in camp. I remember going to every game, backing up every game, not throwing, and was eventually taken off the roster. Pitched that whole season in AAA. Worst year of my life. Ended up with probably a 6.5 ERA. I don't know. It was bad. And really the whole time going through that season, knowing that this is probably it, but not having any clue what was next. Because again, up until that point, my life, my purpose, my identity was all wrapped up in the game. Nothing else mattered. No relationship mattered. No other pursuit outside of baseball mattered to me at that point. And at the end of the season, I had a teammate, Andy Phillips, invited me to go on a trip to the Dominican Republic. And this guy was my roommate the second half of the season. And if any guys out there were my roommate, they knew what that entailed. And but Andy was the exact opposite of me. Andy was call him Chapel guys, but Andy never really made judgment comments about the way I was living. He was just consistent and was always there to encourage, to love, whatever. But anyway, at the end of the season, he asked me to go on this trip to the Dominican. He said we're going to play golf and do clinics, work with kids. And, I'd always wanted to do stuff like that, but probably more out of selfishness, never really did. But I kind of felt like I owed him, to go down there on that trip with him because of what I'd put him through the second half of that season. So anyway, I flew out of Tampa. He flew out of Birmingham. And, I quickly learned this wasn't what I was thinking it was. There was about 20 other guys that were flying out of Tampa at the time. And they were all huddled around each other, hugging each other, love you, brother, just weird stuff that I'd never seen, not at 5:30 in the morning.
Sure.
And one of them walked over and asked me my name, and he said, "Oh, man, that's awesome. You're with us this week." And it was like it just hit me. Like I'm going on a trip with, a bunch of Bible thumpers, and that was definitely not my scene. And but it's too late. I'm like, I'm already there. And so I just figured, shoot, I'll just keep my head down. I won't talk. I'll slip away, when they're doing their deal, and it'll be okay. So yeah, I had no idea what God was about to do in my life.
I'm laughing because you mentioned earlier that you grew up Catholic and you went to, sort of nominal, but it wasn't really a part of your life. And I was the same way. So I didn't have this encounter, if you want to call it that, with God, a real encounter and understanding who Jesus is until I was 27 years old, 28 years old. So I was a little bit later in life too. And if I'm doing the math here, that's around the age that you are at this point in 2005 when you go on this trip. So you go on this trip, and what happens?
So the first clinic that we did was in Quisqueya. I'm told that Soriano and Robinson are from or grew up or played on or whatever. And, I never really thought about where they came from and what they endured to get where they are. And, Latin guys are always just loud in the clubhouse and obnoxious and, always get accused of stealing. And, there's always issues there between Latin guys, American guys. But being down there for the first time and you're seeing, this type of poverty and there's 500 kids on this field. Very few had gloves. Some didn't have shoes. Some didn't have pants. But every one of them was hungry for the game. They were dialed in. That first camp lasted 3 hours, 4 hours. None of them asked for a break. None of them asked for water. They were just dialed in. And because, the only way off the island is, I think most of them think is through the game.
Yeah.
And, God started to work in my heart and showed me how similar that we were as far as baseball being a god and baseball being, really all that you feel like you have. Anyway, we finished the clinic, and there's a guy behind home plate drawing a painting or something, and I'm behind second. A lot of the older kids are around me kind of asking questions about the big leagues, and not like baseball questions, more money, girls, just that whole scene. And, man, I started to feel convicted about my life and how I was living and what I was doing, and I'd never felt this before. I felt guilt when I got caught, and when something bad happened, but I had not felt this. And I really started thinking about my influence over people, especially brother and sister, and I started feeling really, really bad. And, I'm on this trip with a bunch of these Christians, and I don't even know where to turn now.
Yeah.
Typically I'd know where to turn, but now I didn't know what to do. We went back to the hotel after the camp, and, man, I'm a mess. I'm not talking. I'm trying to figure out what's going on inside of me. No idea where to turn. I don't know what to do with it. And we had an American pastor was sharing that night, and I don't remember what he said. I just remember sitting in the back of the room with my head buried in my hands, and I couldn't stop crying. The last thing he said was, if your pain is greater than your fear of change, then you're ready. And unless you've been in this position or felt like this, it's probably going to sound silly to you, but I felt so much pain, again, because the game was all I had, and I felt like it was being taken. And what's the point in doing anything without baseball?
Sure.
And anyway, when he said those words, it took me a little bit to understand it. But I just remember saying, okay, God, if you can take this away, I'm all in. I have no idea how you're going to change me. I've tried to change a lot in my life. on my own. But if you can take this away, I'm all in. And I don't know if you've ever like dove down to the bottom of a lake or river, and a deep lake, and tried to grab sand and come back to the surface and not really knowing where you are, because you can't really see where the surface is.
Yeah.
But then when you break through and the air rushes through your body, that's what it felt like. And it felt like all that garbage, all that just junk had been removed, and I felt like I had life. And it was nothing like what I'd ever experienced before. And in an instant, I went from being lost to being found, blind, but I had sight. And God just changed my whole life. It wasn't like I was really looking for God at all.
Right.
But God just met me right where I was, and He said, "You're mine now. I've given you a new purpose. I've given you a new identity." And He changed it all November 2nd, 2005.
Man, I love that story. That's amazing. And I can tell as you share it how important that day is to you, because there's still a lot of emotion there. And I kind of get the same way when I share my story too. And it's not nearly your story or where you were, but at the same time, it doesn't matter, because you said it. God meets us right where we are in our moments if we allow Him to. But then here's the thing, Sam. You got to get back on a plane and go home and start living life. And I tell people this all the time. It's not like you say yes to God and just everything changes now. And yes, things change, but there has to be a process here that you got to walk through. What was that like immediately when you go home? Because you said you felt this sort of immediate change in your nature and your identity, but then you kind of, like I said, the world comes back at you. So what was that like, kind of adapting back and making a change? And what did change for you after you got back from that trip?
Yeah, I mean, I was jacked up to come home and let everyone know what had happened. I couldn't explain it. I mean, I remember sitting on the beach in Mondolio. I texted everyone. I said, "Hey, I don't know what just happened, but my life has changed."
Wow.
A lot of guys were busting my chops and making fun of it. But some guys, my closest friends, were like, "Man, that's so awesome," just because they know who I was and what I was doing. What wasn't good. It was destructive. And anyway, I get home, and I mean, I started going to service 3 days a week. I started doing Bible studies several days a week. And I mean, God just changed all of my desires. I mean, like all of them. I can't explain it. It was definitely nothing that I did on my own. It was all Him at work in me. And so now I'm fired up. I was a free agent at the time, and got a deal with the Cubs. Worked out that December, and man, I couldn't wait to get to camp. I mean, I was a new person. I'm going back to the big leagues.
Yeah.
I started watching all these YouTube videos, all these athletes, all their stories, and I hear the word platform and testimony. And these are words I didn't know existed, because I had never watched, I had heard any of this stuff. And so, again, going back to my plans were to get back and just honor God with my life. And I was just going to make such a huge kingdom impact. And first day of live batting practice, I felt something that I had never felt in my shoulder. The next day, I go to play catch with my throwing partner, Brian Reith, and the ball fell out of my hand. This has never happened. I picked it up, and it fell out of my hand again. Long story short, about 3 weeks, maybe a month later, my agent calls and he says, "Hey, we talked to the Cubs and they think you should retire. That you won't be able to come back." I'm in Mesa, this Holiday Inn. Just laying in my bed, and I start crying again. Because, I mean, up until that point, I had given Him my relationships. I'd given Him my finances. I'd given Him my time. I felt like I had given Him my life, but definitely hadn't given him the game yet. I still wanted control over it. And there was a verse that as soon as I heard that, came to my mind. And James chapter 1, verse 2 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith develops perseverance." And I had no clue what that meant.
Yeah.
But I remember not understanding how anyone can consider any of these trials that we go through joy, because I didn't really know what joy meant. I didn't understand joy was contentment in the Lord. I didn't understand that it was resting in the work that He was doing and it not being exactly what I wanted. I can look back and I can consider that moment joy, just like I can consider the moment joy in 2008 when Washington said, "Hey, we don't have room for you anymore. It's it. Like, it's over." I mean, I can look back and consider it joy now because God had such greater plans for my life. And I don't know, it was a crazy time though, for sure, in my faith journey.
And I'm sure now, as you look back, you can find the joy, as you said, in all of this. So let's kind of fast forward here as we wind down and catch us up on all that's been going on right now, because you're still in the game of baseball, ironically, and God is using baseball in a different way for you to reach people for Him. And I know you went into coaching and had a nice little run coaching a high school baseball team in Tampa, and then called to Score International and eventually Baseball Country and the work you're doing now. Can you kind of share a little bit about where God's brought you to today?
Yeah, so like I said, I got saved in 2005, started coaching high school baseball in 2008 after I got released, and I fell in love with it, and I knew that was my passion, my calling, was to invest in players, all ages, from little league to the big leagues. I just had a major burden for guys pursuing the game, and feeling like, man, this is all that I was created for. And man, I just wanted to free guys from that, because you were created for so much more than just winning ball games or getting drafted or playing in the big leagues.
Yeah.
So anyway, started coaching and at the high school level. Then I found out about this travel ball world, and we didn't grow up doing travel ball. We played the American Legion, and but seeing how kids were getting exploited and abused, and I wanted to step in and help. So we started a travel baseball organization underneath the umbrella of Score International, which is the organization that I went down to the Dominican with in 2005 and got saved. So we started running these teams. We had 4 teams, players from the U.S., and then players from Latin America, Bahamas, Canada, kind of all over, and putting them all together to prepare them, a lot of them for pro ball, but more than that, to be able to share the gospel through the game with them. But I knew that I wanted to do that more full time, and didn't really know how. I felt God was calling me into ministry. I just didn't know what it looked like. I had the assumptions, and I didn't want to be that guy knocking on door asking for support. I felt, man, I can work, I can do things to supplement. At the time, my wife was in medical school. I was running, had a couple automotive shops going, but really was trying to make it happen to where I could do baseball full time. And so laid a vision on my heart to build a complex with dorms and the whole nine, to where we can train guys, we can house guys, really pour in, from the youth level to the big leagues. And for about 4 years, I pursued different options, land uses, long-term joint purchases, but every one of them, the doors kept closing at the very end when we would go to sign contracts. And the last one that was shut down, it crushed me, because it was about a year-long process, a lot of money, a lot of time invested in the project. But they came to the table and said, hey, we know there's going to be more money coming through here. We need more. And knowing that my heart was all kingdom, not about funding, because I mean that would change the mission, right? That would change my intent.
Yeah.
So anyway, that door closed, and I thought God just didn't want me involved in ministry at all, not full time. About a week later, I get a phone call from guys at SCORE, and they asked if we would pray about moving to Gina, Alabama, to run a ministry known as Baseball Country. And I hung up the phone, really upset. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but about a week later, I called back and said, "Hey, I think we're gonna pray about it." And a week after that, my wife and I, Kristen, both felt like, if this is where God wants our family, then we don't have a choice. Like, we have to go. And we had 3 young girls at the time. McKenna was 6, Kate was 4, and Avery was 3. And being from Tampa to move to rural Alabama was kind of crazy. But again, if this is what God wants for our life, then we got to go. And we basically said, all right, God, if you want us there, like, you're going to have to make a way. Money is not something I want to try to talk about with people. I don't want to try to raise support. You have to make a way. The very next morning, I was opening up one of the shops, and 6:30, a friend called from church, and he just asked if I had been living right today. I'm like, today, yeah, it's 6:30, no customers, so far so good. So, well, someone left you a check at church. It's anonymous and it's unrestricted, written to your name. And, we were doing the travel ball stuff in the summer and fall, so I just assumed that was what it was for. We had to raise some funds for kids that didn't have the resources, and so I'm thinking a couple $100, $1,000. He's like, no, this is for a lot more than that.
Wow.
So this is for $100,000.
Holy cow.
And yeah, of course,
so
called
cool.
Kristen, told her, we got to sell the house, sell the shop. Like, he's moving us. So yeah, we got here August 6, 2016. And, again, talking about more plans, we had all these plans for this baseball stuff. We'll move to Greene County, Alabama, one of the poorest counties in the country. It's not really a baseball hotbed.
Right.
There's not a lot of baseball really going on at all. And I started to question, what are we doing? There was an existing field, which we used all that money before we got here to renovate the place. But yeah, I mean, we quickly realized that God had some different plans for the ministry here.
Wow. Sam Marsonek, man, that is an incredible story. I could talk to you all day. I'm sure you probably have more stories of God doing amazing work. For time purposes, we'll just have to get you back on and talk some more another time and share some more stories. But listen, thank you again for sharing your story. Thank you for coming on the show. Just so cool to see what God has done in your life. And real quick, what's the website or a place where people can go to, whether they want to sow into the ministry or just support you or even just learn more about all that you're doing?
Baseballcountry.com is our website. We're on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Baseball Country. So
Love
pretty
it.
easy to find there. And there's a lot of information, or you can just email me for more, sam@baseballcountry.com.
I love it. Sam at baseballcountry.com. Baseballcountry.com is the website. Sam, thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate your heart and just excited for all the Lord is doing. Keep being a light out there. You're doing great work. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Jason.
That was Sam Marsonek. And wow, I'm just so thankful to Sam for coming on the show and sharing his story. I told you that's going to be one of those, you're going to tell someone and say, have you heard the story of Sam Marsonek? People might be like, who's Sam Marsonek? It's one of the most incredible stories of intersecting baseball and Jesus that I've ever heard. And maybe Sam Marsonek didn't go on and pitch 15 years and win 300 games and win Cy Young awards. but man, is he impacting people for eternity through the game of baseball. And it's such a cool story, and I'm so glad that he shared it. I really love the raw emotion, too, from Sam, because you can tell, even though that's, 15 years ago that he came to Christ, almost 16 years now, it's still very real and very raw to him in his life. And it's an emotional time for him. And I'm so glad, like I said, that he shared it with us here today. And thanks, Sam, for joining us. Again, that website was baseballcountry.com, just like it sounds, baseballcountry.com. And then his email, he gave it, so I'll give it too. Sam@baseballcountry.com is the email. Sam@baseballcountry.com. Thanks to Sam Marsonek for sharing his incredible story with us here at Sports Spectrum. We also thank you for listening. Maybe you have an idea for someone that should be a guest on this show that has an incredible story. We want to encourage you to email me, jason@sportspectrum.com, if you have an idea for a guest or a show topic or a story that we should be covering. You can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And make sure, again, you go to the website, sportspectrum.com. It has all the content right there at the website. You can check it out at sportspectrum.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Really do appreciate you. Make sure you click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And then tell a friend, tell a family member about Sports Spectrum. Maybe share this incredible story of Sam Marsonek with them. Just text them the link and tell them, hey, you need to subscribe so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. We thank you. We love you. We'll see you next time right here on the show. Again, my name is Jason Romano. Have a great rest of your day, and please do stay safe.